This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Heart Mojo with Melinda Smith. And today, Melinda and I will be discussing caregiving for family members. I don't know if those of you who are listening realize it, but there are more than 9.5 million family caregivers. And those are the ones that are reported. Melinda right now is caring for a family member who is out of state. And that is even harder for many of us. So Melinda, why don't you give us a little bit of background and we'll, go into depth about what it really means to be a family caregiver.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. It's been a little crazy. If you follow me on Facebook, you know I posted a video that my brother was in a car accident in Florida. He's my younger brother, so I'm the oldest. And he needed somebody to be able to watch out for him. So he made me his power of attorney. His wife has passed. So while he was in the hospital, right after he got there, he made me his medical power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. And what that means, in case you don't know, for some of you, is that I am there to help make healthcare decisions for the doctors to talk to, but I do not make any decision unless my brother is unable to make that decision. Now, that seems very simple, but it's not. It's not, because you never know what someone's mental health will be like. You never know, with pain and medications that they're on, the decisions that they'll make. So my sister and I and my mother went to Florida because, well, they said that it was necessary to come down. They weren't sure whether he was going to make it through that weekend. So we went. And a lot of you put prayers out there, and I appreciate that. And he improved a little. But now he's backslid. So again, he's back to being on a BiPAP machine, looking at a ventilator. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I work in this care industry, in the senior care industry, so I deal with this every day. That's an advantage for me, because when I went to the hospital, I knew who to talk to. I knew who to get in touch with, and I knew what to do as far as what to ask for to make sure I had the healthcare power of attorney. Many people would not, and that puts them in a difficult situation. So that's the reason why we want to talk about this today, because we all think we're going to live forever, right? We all think if something happens to us, we're just going to go like that, easy. That's not really the way it happens the majority of the time. And someone has to be the decision maker or the caregiver for you. So that's why we're having this conversation today.
Well, being a caregiver for somebody, even in your own home or their home, is very, very difficult. And it's not that people don't want to care for their family members, but like you said in the beginning, that as long as he is able, he's still going to make his own decisions. However,
Correct.
Sometimes, as ill as your brother may be, his decisions may not be the best decisions.
Right. They're not as clear cut as you think.
Absolutely. And so having this paperwork set up ahead of time is really, really important. I know my husband and I, we waited until about a year ago, which we knew better, but
right.
We just kept saying, hey, what if something happens?
Right.
And so, we got everything together. It's not expensive to do. But when you talk about caring for your brother who's in Florida, when was the last time you saw him before this last trip?
When his wife passed away in 2019. So it had been about 3 years, a little over 3 years.
And during that time, we went through the pandemic. So there was no way for you to get down there. And now, sadly, because of a car accident, he's not doing very well.
No, he's not.
And he does have some family and friends down there. I think you mentioned that are sort of doing some help.
Well, his friends, that's one of the things we did as a fact-finding mission when we got there. Because, it's not that we didn't ever talk. We did, but you know how it is. You talk about peripheral things in your life. You don't talk about really deep things. When his wife was ill, we did speak frequently about that, and then she passed. And our assumption, myself and my sister, was that he handled everything. Well, that's not necessarily the case. So not only were there health issues, but there were financial pieces to this as well. The family that's down there isn't going to be much help. So the friends have been very helpful with his business and things like that. But once again, we didn't really know them. So we had to find each person held a piece of the puzzle. So if you have a loved one that lives in another state and you don't necessarily know all the details of their life, it's important that you find out who the friends are because they can help fill in the blanks. And for
Absolutely.
me, with the hospital, like I said, I at least had a leg to stand on because I knew who I had to speak to. But you have to be assertive because before I got down there, I had to rely on somebody visiting him to call me or the hospital to call me. And I can't tell you how many times I called the hospital and got nothing. They even hung up on me. They were too busy. Now we know the world is shorthanded, right? In most businesses, specifically the medical industry. But as the person who is now the POA, and they know this, I couldn't get an answer. It's very frustrating. How do you make an informed decision to help your loved one if you can't get an answer?
Exactly. Exactly. And I know him having both you and your sister and your mother, even though must have been extremely difficult for your mother.
It was.
Because number one, whoever wants to see their child ill,
Mhm.
and even as an adult child, he's still her child.
Right.
But the most difficult part I really think that you're going through is that your brother, what I don't know what the actual illness is on top of the car accident, but he just one minute he's getting ready to cut strings at the hospital and walk out, and he's not really capable of doing it. And his
Right.
family and friends down there aren't capable of taking care of him.
Right.
And so the communication is really, really important.
Key. Well, he had been ill prior to, like 6 months ago or so, and very stubborn, as a lot of men are, and he signed himself out of rehab and went home. Well, he wasn't with anyone that could really give him the proper home care needed. That's why we have skilled home care and home care available to people. But he wasn't able to, well, he was able to do it. He just chose not to do it. So the car accident kind of tipped that and brought out all those other medical things that we're building. Honestly, if he hadn't had the car accident, he might have already died. He might have died in his sleep because he also had a stroke. So there's a layer to each piece of this. He's having breathing issues. You have to get the breathing issues set. There's heart issues. Then you go to the heart. Then you go to, what's happened with the stroke and can you swallow? And then it's just a layer and a layer and a layer. And most people are not prepared. They don't have enough knowledge to know how to handle that.
And
So,
oftentimes when you hear all these things from his medical providers and the people who had been visiting him before you went down there, you don't know how much is valid until you actually
exactly.
can get there to see him.
Well, and the problem is it's like playing that old telephone game, right? Somebody's listening in the room. They hear a doctor talking or the nurse talking. They get their version of it, and their version is dependent on their relationship with the person, their background in medical, or just education. I mean, it's not against anyone. It's just the idea that if they don't know what they don't know. So when they give information to you, they're giving their version of the information.
Right.
So for example, he got a little fever. Turns out it wasn't a big deal. The doctor didn't even call it a fever. But the person that was there thought, oh, they had to do this test. They had to put him back on this machine because he had a fever. Had nothing to do with the fever. Being here without having access to those medical professionals, that's what I would have believed. So it's very important that if you're a caregiver in the city with the person or if you're out of the city, you need to speak with the doctors on a regular basis. If you're POA, they must call you. You have to put that into place. And if they don't, you need to raise a little holy hell, as they say, and get somebody to respond to you. I did that with case management. That's their job.
Yeah. So if your brother were here, so let's play this scenario out, and he lived in this town and you were helping take care of him. One of the things that we don't realize, caregivers are overworked, overstressed, because they still have their life and their family members to be with.
Right.
And I remember when I was caring for my mother, there were days that I didn't pick up my phone to call my husband. And I didn't even realize days had gone by.
You lost track of time.
Exactly. And then he'd call me and he would be really frustrated with me. And then I would get mad at him because, hey, you know what I'm doing. So there's a communication situation where, as a caregiver, when you get that involved, you don't even realize the stress that you're under and the health issues that you may be incurring for yourself.
Right. Well, right before I went down, I thought I had an appendicitis. Turned out to be diverticulitis, which can be brought on by stress. I've never had it before. And, you know, I have a new job, those of you who know that as well. And so anytime you start a new adventure, even though it might be good, it's still stressful, right? You're still trying to do your best. You're still trying to learn the ropes. On top of that, you throw in caregiving. And remember, my mother lives here too. My mother is 82 years old. My sister and I split up her health care and her financial piece. So there's still that piece to the puzzle. You know, I have a pet. The pet happened to have surgery the same week. That's stressful. He's 13 years old. You know, you're worried about that. You have layer and layer and layer of stress on the caregiver because life gets in the way, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It can't just be one thing. So I think it's important, and I did bring this up in the little video I posted about my brother, about taking a minute for yourself. For me, I was in Florida. Y'all know water's my thing, you know, especially the ocean. It always heals me and makes me feel good. So we took, at the end of the day, after we left him, right before it got dark, about an hour to take my mother, myself, my sister down by the ocean, just to get that fresh air, just to breathe, to take a minute to clear our head, because you need to do that, or you're not going to be any good for anybody if you're ill. And I know we've talked about this before on the show, about caregivers taking care of themselves. And it's hard. You know, it's kind of put that oxygen mask on first.
Right.
But it's very hard when you know you've got all of these things to do, all of these decisions to make. And it's, you know, you kind of get overwhelmed by it.
Well, and one of the things that many of us don't do properly as a caregiver is reach out and ask for help.
True.
And, you know, I was just reading an article today that they said that 93% of family health caregivers do not ask for help. And when they are offered help, and I was one of them who said, no, I can do it. And I look back at that and it's like, what was I thinking? I couldn't do it all. And instead of me, you know, agreeing and asking, I had certain family members who would just walk in very nicely and sort of walk me out of my mother's room and get me to sit down in a chair, and they would walk in and do what needed to be done. I think sometimes as caregivers, and I can see this in you too, Melinda, that, hey, I made a promise. I said I would do it. So, hey, everybody, get out of my way. Let me just do this.
Well, and before I left, I made sure my ducks were in a row. You know, we had a plan. I had every medical professional that I could possibly grab that Tuesday before I came home and talked to them and said, what if this, what if that, covered it. Then I went to my brother and I said, okay, if this happens, do you want this? If this happens, do you want that? Here's the benefit, here's the disadvantage. Now, he seemed to understand. I made him look at me. I made him pay attention because he's got this breathing apparatus on and it's hard. He doesn't feel well. But as his POA and caregiver, I felt it was for my own sanity that I had all the answers I could possibly have at that moment, realizing that it changes by the moment. And it's okay to be frustrated. If you're a caregiver and you're with your loved one at home or out of state and you need to get those answers, it's okay to be frustrated. I was home one day and they were already making changes and I went, no, 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 no. This was the plan. And so I encourage anybody to stand your ground too, because I know they're the medical professionals, but they practice medicine still. And they don't know everything. You know your family members, and if you don't, but at least if you've had that conversation, like I had, I left clear cut on what I wanted to do and what I thought he would want me to do. And their life changes every day. And if something big happens, of course, I will reevaluate. But don't let them say, this is what we're going to do now, and not ask the question why.
Well,
because once I got the answer, I said, no, we're not making any changes.
And something else that I learned just the last couple days, I'm not going to say that I'm caregiving for my husband right now, but he's going through treatment, and the doctor called in a prescription for him. And I am not really good at looking at the instructions. I trust my doctor has read my chart. I trust the pharmacy knows exactly what I'm allergic to. But for some reason, my husband opened up the little leaflet that was in there and he took out a magnifying glass so he could read all the stuff on it.
So small.
And the first two things told him that he couldn't take the medication because he was allergic to two of the main ingredients. And the pharmacy was closed. It was the weekend. Luckily, he could do without the medication, not comfortably, but got through it. Mm-hmm. But the interesting part is when he went into the pharmacy and said something to them today, they said, oops, we don't know how that happened. I went to his appointment this morning to see the doctor, and I said it to the doctor, and he said, oh, is that in his chart?
He didn't look.
Didn't look because he took the phone call from my husband. He just said, oh, I know what will make you more comfortable. Didn't look, called it in, and then the pharmacy made the mistake. Now, I don't think it would have been life-threatening, but it would have not been a fun reaction.
Wouldn't have been good.
Exactly. So as a caregiver, even if that person is not, as we say, really ill, it's up to us to help them understand, what they're taking, why they're taking it, what their treatment is. And you know what? We have to, deal with their mood swings too.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure your brother is going through that.
He's had moments where, he has it's called a BiPAP. So it looks like a big octopus on your face. And it's forcing air. And it's very uncomfortable. It makes your mouth dry. It's pushing air in. It's on your face. It's on your skin. It's not good. And he tried to rip it off. In fact, he's like, I'm signing myself out. And I had to get on the phone, on speakerphone, with the person on the room and say, stop being so stupid. You will fall on the floor because your legs aren't working right now and die. But somebody had to get mad and get back at him and get him back in control. Some of that happens because of frustration. Some of that happens because of medication. And sundowners, we've all heard of sundowners. Right. And once you've been in the hospital, you just lose track of time. So it's a combination, and it's important too as a caregiver to be understanding about that as much as possible. It isn't easy because you're tired, they're tired, you're frustrated, they're frustrated. We deal with that in life when we're not sick, don't we?
Right. Absolutely.
So, but
And,
it's very important that it's better to walk away, take a breath and walk away, have the professional handle that situation in that moment, and then come back.
well,
And then
and
come back
now
and do
with the
that.
holidays coming about, I think we need to be a little more sensitive to the caregivers, because many times they're going to say that they can't join friends and family because they have a
Right.
responsibility. Um, and, maybe we have to give them a little respite. Maybe we have to bring somebody else in who can, take over for an hour or two.
Mhm.
Or, join them wherever they are, whether it's bringing food, drinks, or just, spending a little bit of time with them. Um, I didn't realize how important that was when I was caring for my mother. Um, I know you're in a different situation with your brother down in Florida, but I'm sure there are times during the day that you need that support as well. You're working, you're trying to take care of yourself. Um, you have your family as well, and like you said, your elderly mother. Somebody has to step up and say, "Hey, Melinda, can I help you?" Or just go ahead and do something for you without even asking.
Right, right. Well, I think if you want to do something nice for somebody who's being a caregiver or in a stressful situation, first of all, letting them talk maybe a little bit, because a lot of times as a caregiver, especially if you're working and running around and doing your day, you don't have time to talk about how you feel. So we're doing that a little bit in this program as well. I'm talking a little bit about how I feel, but as you all know, that's kind of how this started. To begin with, it was a challenge for me to go through cancer. I've had many other challenges along the way. God must trust me a whole heck of a lot because He gives me a lot of things to work on, but it gives me things to talk about here, and hopefully it helps you. So give somebody the opportunity to just talk and listen. You don't have to have the answers, just listen. You can do something small like, take them out for a cup of coffee, bring them their favorite ice cream. If you live with them, just say, hey, don't worry about anything today. Today is a get out of jail free card. There's no cleaning the house. We're just going to enjoy the day, watch movies, have popcorn, something that makes you feel good, or laugh. Laughter is so important. We just did the laughter yoga, right? We did a show
Right.
on that. So important. I think if you do that, it doesn't cost a lot or anything if to give a little bit of your time. And if you can help, if you're together to help with the caregiver, so you can be with the person, it's free, right? You're going to give that person an hour to go have a massage, to go out to the store by themselves and not worry about it. And you stay with that person. That's free. It doesn't cost you anything, but what it gives is you can't even put a price on it.
Well, and sometimes for the patient, having somebody else there for that little bit of time. Um, and again, I would notice that with my mother. Um, I'd come back and, she was very relaxed. And it would be like, well, she was so agitated when I left. Um, and a lot of that, I now can look back and realize I was stressed out and she was feeling my
Hmm.
stress. But when somebody pushed me out of the room and they came in and were just laid back about helping her, she was fine. So, there's a lot to learn about caregiving, but it's really about just being compassionate and sharing kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is if we all get fearful, we have to try to keep that fear out of the room with the individual. They're trying to heal, hopefully, and get better. And if you're afraid, they're afraid. They are looking to you. You don't have to be the strongest. You're not Superman or Superwoman. But if you have that fear, that I really would suggest you try to put aside as much as possible. As Karen said, you're being compassionate and kind. Tell the person that you care about them. Take a minute to I'll give you a quick story. When my brother was little, he hated his feet touched. Big sister did everything she could to irritate him. We would have foot fights. I would tickle his feet. And what do you think I did while he was laying in bed? I would tickle his feet, and he'd raise his little fist or his big fist like this, like he used to when he was a little kid. Like, oh, I'm gonna punch you one. But it made him smile. And the goal was to bring back a good memory, a fun memory, even if he didn't like to have his feet touched. And then we started telling stories. And it was amazing. You can watch the blood pressure. You could see the difference. There was a mental change. So that might be something to think about too. When you're with somebody and you're caregiving, start talking about the old stories. Don't pick the family ones that are the troublemaker ones. Pick the fun ones, the fun stories.
Well, and I also, want to share is that as a caregiver, if your loved one really isn't really going to heal, so to speak, in some ways we start grieving before their
Yeah.
end. And sometimes outsiders don't understand that. It's like, well, hey, your brother is still here. Hey, your mother is still here. Well, yeah, they are, but we don't know exactly how long that's going to be. And just
Yeah.
seeing your brother in the state that he was in is difficult. You may be the
is.
big sister, but you expect little brother to be up and about.
A pain in the butt, like he
Yep.
always was. I think for my mother, so for me, I have a certain view of life and death. It's how I look at life. I believe I'm a spiritual person, but I know that death is part of life. No parent wants to see their child go before them.
Right.
But there also comes a point where, depending on where you're at cognitively, you really don't get it, or you don't want to. And it's the fear that I talked about before. So she didn't really show fear so much, but it was almost like I'm staying in the background, not upholding your child's hand. I'm in the background. And I think that's a coping mechanism. For me, I want to be there. I want to talk to that person, hopefully give them some words of kindness. Like I said, tell the stories to get them to laugh, because I know those things are healing qualities, whether it's physical or mental. But I do think we have to accept the fact that some people they can't deal with it that way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that's where, she was in that picture. She was there. She wanted to be there with her child, but there's a line that's hard for some people to cross.
And we see that oftentimes with spouses. They just don't want to believe that their other half is ill, isn't responding in the way that they
Right.
want them to. And that's okay. We're all individuals. We all need to deal with these situations in our own comfortable way. And for your mother, that must have been her
Her way
comfortable
of
way.
dealing with it.
She knew she was there. She was doing what she needed to do.
Right.
And we can't make people do anything else. That would be worse.
I think it's also important to know that not everybody can be a caregiver as
Right?
much as you want to be. My brother was very confident that he wanted me to do it, because he knows that I would, not leave any stone unturned medically. I do have a background in that, so that helped, and he trusted me. But in this instance, my mother would not be the person to handle it, because she just couldn't. And that's okay. And anybody who's watching and they're thinking, oh my God, I don't know if I could ever do that. You'll know when you get there. And if you can't, it's okay. But you do need to help find the right person for that.
Exactly.
I think that's an important responsibility too. If it's not something you can handle personally, and the person wants you to do it, then you need to try to find somebody to help you do it. Ask for the help.
It's quite interesting when My parents put all their paperwork together. I got a phone call from my dad, and he said, "I'm sending you some paperwork. It's official. We've, signed off." And I'm thinking, like, what are you talking about? And he said, "We are giving you power of attorney over our healthcare issues." And I said to him, "Why me? You have two sons, and my
Mm,
brothers are older than me." And he said, "Because they won't be able to do it if they're put to task." And he gave my other brother, financial responsibility. And you know what? My parents knew us well enough to know
mm.
that when things would happen, even though I said I wouldn't be able to do anything, I realized, yeah, this is my responsibility and I can do it.
Right. And
So,
you want to do what they wanted you to do.
absolutely.
That's the important part. We all have our own feelings and our own issues with our family, our friends, but mostly our family. And you can't let that issue get in the way. And I think the person, they trusted that you wouldn't. If that's what they said they wanted, then that's what we'll do. That's what I
Exactly.
tried to do. I tried to cover every base that I could, get every medical piece of the puzzle, come up with a plan, get his approval for the plan because he was able to do it. And then we go from there. And then, of course, anything can change. The course and the journey can change, as we all know. But at least I felt comfortable having a plan. And I think as a person who might be planning for their own, future with healthcare power of attorneys, financial power of attorneys, you will feel so much better if you have a plan. Don't keep everything a secret. Don't keep all your medical care a secret. Don't keep your financial things a secret because it's not going to help. It's just not going to help that caregiver move forward to do what's best for you. It is important to have somebody you trust, obviously, but you can't give pieces of it. You got to do it all.
Absolutely. And it's also very important for our young adults to start planning for the future. Um,
True.
you know, I have two sons, and um, when we did our paperwork, we said to them, "We think you should do yours." And my oldest son said, "Well, why?" And he's an attorney. He should, I
You
would have
should
thought he would have
know.
known better. But his comment was, "Well, why?" And I said, "Because if you were to get sick and you couldn't speak for yourself, who do you want to speak for you? Your doctor, the nurses, somebody who doesn't really know
State.
you, or the state?" Exactly. And he said, "I never thought about that." And I said, "I know, because you're busy taking care of everybody else right now as an attorney."
Right.
But once that switch went off, he's, a single man. And he finally said, "Yeah, I have to take care of things." And then he told us that 5 years ago, he had pneumonia so bad that he could not speak for himself. And I wasn't called, and his father wasn't called. We had no idea until he
Wow.
was recovering. So I really encourage, get your paperwork together, find somebody who you can trust. Um, and hopefully none of us will really have to worry about that in the future. But
Right.
if we need it, it'll be there.
Well, and if you don't want a family member, you can choose an attorney to do that. They have to act on your behalf, in your best interest.
Right.
I want to remind people too. So, as a parent, I have two sons as well. When my son turned 18 and went off to college, he was there 2 weeks and was hit by a car. And I didn't think about it. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be down there. But they didn't call me. He was able to call me. But guess what? When your child turns 18, you have no legal rights for any
Right.
information. They don't have to. And we're sending them off to college. We're crying, oh my God, my baby goes to college. And you think you still have the same power that you had before, but you don't.
Right.
So even though you think it might be macabre to talk about death and things like that with an 18-year-old, you really need to do that because you just never know. I mean, thank God he was fine. He even limped to school and then went to the emergency room. He took his class, made sure he got an A on his test, and then he went, something his mother would have done. But think about it, it could have been totally the other way. I wouldn't have even known.
Absolutely.
And so I really encourage any parents watching this. If you have an 18-year-old, the minute they turn 18, it's like a rite of passage. You're not trying to take over their life, and you need to tell them that. You need to tell them this only comes into play if you are physically unable to make a decision, whether it's financially or healthcare. Because some of our teenagers, they have money in the bank. They go to school, they work. You know, that money, you would not have access to pay their bills. If you gave them the money and put it in their account, once it's in their account, you're off unless you
Right.
kept it as a joint account, which I did do, by the way, to make it easier, but to transfer money. But many people don't because they want them to learn their
The
own way of handling it.
responsibility.
Right.
Absolutely.
But that could backfire too.
Well, I know for some people who are listening, they're saying, why are we talking about this? And I think the reason we're talking about it is that, many of us are experiencing, these situations. Like I said, if 9.5 million of us are caregivers to family members, there's a real issue out there because many of us are doing it just because we don't know how else to get the help, or
Right.
we feel responsible. And either way, there is help out there, and just ask for it, because when you're too stoic, people will walk away after a while if you don't
Right.
accept their help.
And also, you can feel just so overwhelmed. It's not even about your family or friends helping. It's about understanding that there's other help out there in the world to help you, like in the hospital. Go to your case management person. If you're having an issue, go to an advocate. There are medical advocates out there. That's their job. You can look them up. You can Google and find that in your area. There are attorneys. If they're seniors, there are elder law attorneys. But if you don't want to go that far, you can just start with the hospital. Start with your case management person. Make them talk to you. If your loved one doesn't have their directives, whether do they want to be on life support? Don't they want to be on life support? It's not just about the healthcare power of attorney. What do you want? What do you want? What does your loved one want? You can do all that at the hospital. It doesn't cost anything. A healthcare power of attorney, as long as you have witnesses, you're good. You do need it notarized if it's financial. That's a different thing. But for the healthcare piece of it, you can print that. They have all the paperwork right there at the hospital. Make sure you get copies and make sure they file it and put it in your loved one's chart, because they lost the first copies. And that was
Wow.
pretty upsetting to me. But we managed to redo, and it's all good. But make sure that you get copies. Make sure it goes in. Get the help from the hospital. They do have people for you there.
Well, at this point, I want to wish everybody happy holiday season. Make it happy for yourself and for your loved ones. I loved what you said about, sharing stories, even at somebody's highest level of pain. Oftentimes, that little story that they hear, will make them smile or
Right.
get
It's
them
a
to
good memory.
respond.
It's a good
Absolutely.
memory that you have of each other. And in this holiday season, this is the time when you're with your family to think about those things and think about, do we have our things together? You don't have to talk about it at Thanksgiving dinner, but usually you're there for a day or two, and take that moment and say, hey, is there anything we need to discuss, mom, dad, whatever, so that you are kind of on the same page or working toward that. And just be grateful for every day that you have, because this seemed like a tough subject to talk about, but y'all know I try to talk about things I'm in the middle of, and I'm in the middle of that. And I think the emotion behind that, the feelings behind that, we all have experienced at some point or will experience. it's okay. It's okay no matter how you feel, but there is help. And as we're going now, even talking in the holidays, again, being grateful for the time you have with your family and friends, this moment stands out to me more than ever right now.
And remember what we talked about last time. We talked about how laughter can help heal. And I've been using that quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. So go back and listen to it. And if you have any
Right.
questions, feel free to reach out. I'll have Melinda's information in the show notes as usual. You can reach out to her or to me. The two of us know some elder attorneys. So if you're looking for a referral,
And
we can help you.
advocates.
And advocates, absolutely. So make this a good holiday season and let's all stay safe. Talk
Happy
to y'all soon.
Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye.